All right, welcome back. We're going to do another parking lot Uygur ObnoxiouScope talk, and today we're going to expand on last night's topic, which was the Electoral College, and of course there was the reparations debate, which I think I've addressed enough. So, in addition to proposing reparations and eliminating the Electoral College, another proposal which is gaining a lot of traction even among some mainstream Democrats, or what used to be, I guess, mainstream Democrats, is packing the Supreme Court. So those are two things that will probably end up causing the United States to become much less of a real representative republic slash democracy. It eliminates a lot of the checks and balances, and that's one of the differences between a classical democracy in the context of, the popular vote decides, which, there's countries that go along that sort of route. A lot of those countries are smaller than the U.S., but for example, Brazil, their presidential election, I believe, goes really according to the popular vote, not according to the electoral college over there, even though they do kind of count the states. So that didn't really help this year because apparently the person who won the popular vote over there is somebody that the left considers to be the equivalent of, Bossa Nova Hitler. They would basically consider him Bolsonaro, who was actually here yesterday. And Bolsonaro is kind of a basic person. I don't really know if there's much to really get enthusiastic about. In fact, I don't really agree at all with his policy with respect to the rainforest and conservation at all. And, some of his ideas about civil liberties I wouldn't support here in the U.S. But it's important just to clarify that he won according to a 2-round system. So in the first round, you basically have all of the candidates on the same ballot, and the top 2 people meet in a runoff at the end, which is also decided by a popular vote, which he crushed. I think he had 57% of the vote compared to the other guy, Fernando Haddad, who had virtually, he was basically their, the mattress that was thrown against the door to try to keep the SWAT team out. That was the left's. That was their left's sacrificial lamb to Bolsonaro. And their complaint is, well, the only reason that Bolsonaro won was because the right-wing fascists and libertarians of the Koch brothers, they put Lula in prison for charges that were never proven. Look, Lula, who is supposedly this figure of, he's supposedly this labor slash activist, whatever. He's a labor leader and an activist leader and former president. Suddenly he starts to live on all these properties and get, all these perks of office, and he's acting as president. He's working within the office of the next president, and meanwhile this massive corruption scandal erupts in the country's nationalized oil industry that everybody knows was dirty to the core. And people are saying, well, nothing happened. Why does Rousseff, who was, by the way, Lula's successor, why did she get removed from office? They call it a soft coup. No, a soft coup happened because Brazil has an impeachment process just like some other countries do. So, yeah, when it is the popular vote, when it is something that's not decided by an electoral college, the left wing, the people who believe in Marxism, socialism, quote-unquote democratic socialism, okay, they still make excuses for why their people lose and why everything falls apart and why their country is basically a box of fucking kitty litter that could have been, paradise. And Brazil is an excellent example. Brazil is a country, there's no sanctions to blame there, by the way, like they do with Venezuela. Ecuador, the same thing. Ecuador, a leftist leader turns against leftism, says, well, the reality is that we didn't gain anything from these ridiculous policies. So that's concerning the popular vote. Then you get to the topic of packing the Supreme Court. And there's people, especially, this was until recently kind of the domain of the type of people who wrote for, In These Times or The Nation, or you could say, let me see here. I hope it doesn't tilt over. If I'm upside down, forgive me. But you have The Nation, In These Times, Mother Jones. They're all in favor of court packing because they think because FDR was in favor of court packing and he couldn't get it done because of so-called conservative Democrats at the time. They say, well, this is the unfinished revolution of FDR and the New Deal. No, the reason that court packing was not considered at the time is not because it's unconstitutional. This is how it works. Congress can expand the number of Supreme Court judges or judges on the federal bench, whatever. It's Congress's job to decide how many federal judges there are and how many Supreme Court judges there are. So yes, that's the check that Congress puts on the Supreme Court. They can also impeach judges, but they don't. The objective of that is not to appoint judges in order to implement an agenda that is favorable to you. If that was the case, then why would let's say the Republicans had decided in the last session when they had both houses of Congress, and this was kind of talked about a couple times, there was talk of breaking up the Ninth Circuit because it was just way, way, way too large. That's also entirely constitutional. Okay, but the Republicans didn't make it an ideological issue. The issue is that you have one circuit that represents the entire part of the country, from Alaska to Montana, all the way down to, I believe it's Arizona, is also in the Ninth Circuit. If I'm wrong, you can correct me. So the issue is not packing the Supreme Court. The issue is politically packing it. Okay, when the Supreme Court was expanded, it was often because the country was getting larger, and the Supreme Court justices, if you didn't know, also have the responsibility to oversee circuits of the federal appeal court system and decide which cases that are being appealed to the Supreme Court get heard. Okay, which ones get a hearing in the Supreme Court. Okay, that's the reason why the Supreme Court has been expanded in the past. It has nothing to do with approving or disapproving of various policies, whether it's abortion or gun rights or segregation or gay marriage or anything. That's not the reason that the Supreme Court has been expanded or reduced in the past. In fact, I think I could be wrong, but I think the last time the Supreme Court was expanded was in the mid-1800s. Now, does that mean that the Supreme Court should never be expanded? I don't think so. But the issue here is that you're making it a political objective. In order to override the conservative character of the Supreme Court at the moment, you're trying to say, well, once we get into power, we're just going to load a bunch of people that we like. And that begs the question, okay, Democrats, if you and liberals and progressives, if you're listening, okay? If you're listening, listen real good. If you think that that's a legitimate position to take because you are a progressive and you think progressive ideas should be implemented, then a person who's like a neocon, somebody who supports somebody like Mike Pence, let's say Trump finishes 8 years in office, or Trump dies in his second term in office, or Trump doesn't win, but the Democrats have a divided government, and you have, let's say, Cory Booker is president for the next 4 years, but the Senate is in Republican hands. So for the next 4 years, he can't really expand the Supreme Court. He might get 2 picks on the Supreme Court, but he has to basically submit his picks to the Senate, the Republican Senate, and they could just choose not to approve it. Now, if he does have a Democratic majority in the Senate, yes, he could just submit his picks and they would probably approve it, just like the Republicans did with Trump's picks. Okay, then what about packing the court? They can't pack the court unless the Democrats control both houses of Congress. And the way things are looking now, it's a distinct possibility, okay? And I'm not going to guess at the moment, but it's a distinct possibility that Nancy Pelosi, because of her lack of popularity and her ineptitude, she loses the House back to the Republicans in 2018, whether that the Republicans take the White House or lose the Senate. or whatever happens at the White House and the Senate, it's very possible that the Democrats lose the House. So that's going to immediately rule out any idea of packing the court. You can't pack the court as president. You need Congress in order to pack the court. In fact, FDR was the closest person to having a situation where he could have packed the court, because he had a crazy supermajority in both the House and the Senate when he was president in the years 1936 to 1940. So if he couldn't do it at the time with major majorities of the Democrats at the time, what makes you think that a new Democratic president could pack the court in, with either a divided government or, I would probably wager that at the moment it could be a problem for them to pack the court, even with a Democratic majority in both houses and a Democratic president. But I could be wrong. Things are getting crazier every day because they're talking about packing the Supreme Court. So let me give you the worst case scenario for the Democrats. Let's say Pence gets into office because Trump dies in office or something. Not that I'm wishing for anything. I'm just putting this out there. Let's say Donald Trump has to leave office, or he passes away in office, or let's say he completes his 8 years and Pence gets elected, and Pence has a majority of the Senate and the majority in the House. Would you want Mike Pence to pack the Supreme Court with corporatist, neocon Republican judges who would probably, by the way, Brett Kavanaugh was not a judge that I really supported. So these would probably be Brett Kavanaugh type judges, ones that have very, either strict constitutionalist, or they might even infuse a little bit of religious belief into their rulings. You wouldn't want that, would you? And this is coming from someone, I don't really like Mike Pence. I think some of the image of him is exaggerated, though. People were making a big deal about the Irish Prime Minister bringing his boyfriend to meet Mike Pence, as if they think because Mike Pence has kind of religiously what's the word? He religiously objects to gay marriage. He's not really a fan of gay lifestyles. They think he's never met a gay person in his life and never had to deal with them. That's how out of their minds they are. They think because he's a person who's I think he's a religious Catholic, they think that he's never actually met a gay person in his life. So they think it's a big deal when Mike Pence meets the Prime Minister of Ireland and his gay lover. They thought it was a big deal when Kyrsten Sinema, who is a bisexual woman, was sworn in by him to the Senate on a bunch of law books. They really made a big deal out of saying, oh, look how uncomfortable he looked. The entire scene looked completely normal. But just think about that then. If that's the way you see Mike Pence, would you like to see Mike Pence expand the Supreme Court and pack it with hardcore judges that would make the few liberal judges on the Supreme Court that are left, Kagan, Sotomayor, Ginsburg, and Breyer, they would become irrelevant? And remember, Breyer and Ginsburg are the oldest judges currently on the court. So that's about it. Please like, share, subscribe to my other channel, Razor Ray Special Cuts, as well as my BitChute channel, Bold Like a Leopard, as well as my accounts on Gab and Minds. Gab is @Starscream85. I'll talk to you later.